Hello, Broncos. This is Sean Henderson, Russell High School principal.
This is Galen Walter, middle school principal.
And we're here to talk to you about the plans for the fall. The coin phrase from the state is the navigating change. And before we get any further, we want to really talk about change. We know that there's a lot of change going on in education in our world right now. We want to provide you with as much information as we possibly can, and we most certainly appreciate your patience with us.
While enrolling your student, you have several options. And you can refer to this PowerPoint later on because it will be on our website. But you have two options, the on-campus, which we're calling our hybrid model, and remote learning, where you're doing all of your learning from home via Google Classroom with the contact and content information happening from the teacher, with one teacher as your primary remote learning specialist.
Yeah, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. The other thing for the on-campus folks, the on-campus students will have hours that they're in school with the brick and mortar, and they will also have some online things. So we'll go over that in a moment. First up is the RHS schedule, and what you'll see is red and blue. Red and blue came back on purpose because it's something that our teachers work with on a regular basis. It's something our students understand. And the reason why Mr. Walter and I are here talking to you together is that we took a lot of time to plan things together because we wanted to make sure that you had all the information that you needed, especially for these shared staff members that we have. We have teachers that go between the two buildings. And we're going to have an AM and a PM group, and so will the middle school. But as it pertains to the high school, you'll notice that between Monday and Tuesday, they're going to see all of their teachers. And then they're going to see all of their teachers again on Thursday and Friday. A common question that we are getting is, what about Wednesday? Is that mandatory? The answer is yes. It's just we're going to get really creative with what we do on Wednesday. And for the bottom here, this is going to be true for the RMS as well. But this schedule is going to be in place for whatever life throws at us. If it happens to be that we can do the thing we're talking about, that we have half of our students coming to school every day, 5 days a week, that's great. If we happen to have to quarantine due to a COVID-19 diagnosis with staff or students, we're still going to follow this. And if we happen to go completely online due to something that's happening at the state level, like we did in the spring, we're still going to follow this. And what I mean by that is, if you are a AM student, your AM, regardless of how we go to school. And if you're a PM, it's the same way. So I want you to kind of think through that as we are discussing. But this is the high school schedule, and now we're going to jump over to RMS.
And once again, the high school and middle school together created this plan because of our shared staff. And it looks a little bit different than the high school in the form that we are doing on Mondays, the blue days, 1 through 4 only, because we only have 4 class periods in the morning and in the afternoon. But if you look then on Fridays, we'll pick up the afternoon, 5 through 8. Red days are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Now, this is not a major concern for the majority of our students because this really applies to elective classes for our red and blue days. So if your student is in math class blue 1, they're going to be in blue 1. That's their first hour every day. They don't switch between red 1 and blue 1. That's always their day. And once again, we wanted a model that could be used, unlike what happened in the spring of the year. We need teachers in contact with content area as much as possible, which we're going to get into that here in just a little bit as well. But no matter if we go quarantine or we're brick and mortar, this is the schedule that will be followed. And I just can't emphasize that enough. But again, this is our schedule. Wednesdays, same situation. There's some wiggle room in that yet. Staff needs to be involved with more of that, but those are mandatory days as well. So it's a 5-day schedule, either AM or PM.
The other thing that I'd like to talk about before we leave this slide, and this is true in both buildings, is that you'll notice lunch there, and it says grab and go. We're going to talk about lunch more later, especially after we've had an opportunity to talk more with our lunch staff and the great people that work in the lunchroom. But understand that there will be time built into the AM and PM students, one group that's outgoing and one that's incoming, to make sure that they can eat. And so that's something that will be addressed later, but I wanted to hit on that real quick. The next thing up is when we say that we're going to half our students and we're going to have an AM group and a PM group, there's going to be some organization to make that happen. Again, as Mr. Walter and I sit together, we're talking about making sure that we're accounting for every family. And so when we sit down after enrollment is over on August 7th, we're going to discuss every family and what those preferences were. And we have to be fair in saying that when you give us your preference, we're going to have to work in the confines of, we have two groups that we have to create. And inside that enrollment question, it says, what is the rationale for the preference that you provided us? And the reason for that is we needed to make sure that we are following who you're related to, meaning do you have a sibling in the high school that is, and you're a middle school student? We need to know that so you're going to school at the same time. So parents are going to give us those preferences. We want to do our best to accommodate what people are saying, but we also, in fairness, want to say that we are going to eventually have to create these groups. It kind of goes all the way back to the old half-day kindergarten model. That's kind of where we started with all of this, that teachers are doing the same thing with the group A that they're doing with the group B, the AM and PM. So that's kind of how that looks. We want to kind of talk you through a little bit of this hybrid on campus. What does it look like to be an on-campus student in the fall of 2020?
So students grade 6 through 12, they're coming to school Monday through Friday, either in an AM or a PM session. And again, in your enrollment package, you get to decide, you get to choose which option. And on that enrollment form, I would also ask that you also put a descriptor in there on the purposes why. And that just helps us when we are organizing all that information to kind of prioritize some of your needs. They'll complete an 8-hour class schedule as we have in the past. That's normal. And of course, it's red and blue, a little different from the high school than it is from the middle school.
Yeah, we're going to have 17 hours of synchronous and class time and 17 hours of asynchronous, meaning time that you're going to be doing things at home. Mr. Walter and I, in all of our conversations with our teachers, with any student or parent that calls, that does not mean you're in school for 17 hours and you have 17 hours of homework. It doesn't work like that. But what it means is that when you combine the off-campus time with the on-campus time, those are the numbers that we're hitting. But we're trying to create engagement and students that are interested in the learning, and there's going to be activities on and off campus. And I put Wednesdays back on here because they're mandatory. It looks a little different when you view our schedules, but Wednesday will be school, absolutely. It's just that it will look a little different. We will get really creative as we work through that. As we look to remote learning, we need to know, first of all, you need to know that a remote learning student is completely remote. They will be worked with a remote learning coordinator who is an assigned teacher at RMS and RHS that will call and Zoom and maintain support and direction daily, and that those will be logged, and that communication is something that we will keep track of. The learning objectives, the scope and the sequence of the remote learners, and the goals is to make sure that is an equitable education, that we have the same kind of things happening for both groups, because ultimately we hope that we are all back together again as soon as we possibly can be. So we know that remote component will look a little bit different, but that is a completely different group, both with teachers and students, than it is with our on-campus hybrid students. So please know that.
We just believe that the health and safety of all of our children are of utmost importance. We believe in education. We believe in getting our children involved with our educational system and making those connections with their peers as well as their teachers. This hybrid model that we created really took that to heart, that we wanted to make sure that the health and safety of our students, and there's a lot of undercurrent with this as far as more scheduling, more building, where do we put kids in the building and so on. That's a continuous ebb and flow. and we're working on that daily, and for the betterment of all students and for our community. And so we just appreciate your help and guidance through this process. Again, we have their best interest at heart, and are creating a model which I think can be followed for a long time.
And if you have questions, please reach out anytime. Mr. Henderson, I've got my email address there, and Mr. Walters is there. So thank you all. We will be tuning back in, of course, lots as we proceed forward with the summer, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Take care.